Okay, mic check. Okay. Here we go, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Any man who thinks he is indispensable ain't. General Patton did not use ain't in his usual conversation. When he used ain't with this principle, the power of the principle struck with greater speed when seasoned with profanity. General Patton explained, "In war, every man is expendable. That includes me. Any man who thinks he is indispensable already is not worth his weight in anything. I will transfer such an officer immediately. Every man must be willing to give his life to accomplish the mission, but do not lose your life without making several of the enemy lose theirs. Never die alone. Take several of the enemy with you." He would continue. Any man who starts thinking he is indispensable will start staying away from the fighting at the front. He will spend more time in the rear. Echelon's thinking he is too important to risk going where the shells are failing are men and men are being killed. This man is a coward. Twice over. He is afraid of himself and of the enemy. In every war, man is expendable. General Patton did transfer officers because of their overestimation of their importance. I remember one officer who qualified for a transfer in a few seconds. When we were at our base camp in the desert, we had a 2-hour break during the hottest time of the day. Our mail arrived during this extremely hot period. Usually, one junior grade officer would walk in the sun to pick up the mail for other staff members. One day, a captain announced he was going to the mailroom, and a dozen officers asked him to bring back their mail when he returned. The captain never returned with any mail for junior grade officers. Later that evening, in the mess tent, we asked the captain why he never returned with our mail. The captain, now wearing the gold oak leaves of a major, speaking as seriously as a minister announcing a death, said, "Gentlemen, when I picked up my mail, I received my letter of promotion to the rank of major. I did not deem it proper for a field grade officer to be carrying mail for junior grade officers." We were so shocked we could not speak nor laugh. The first notice of a promotion came when the new rank was in front of the name on the envelope enclosing the notice of promotion. In the few seconds when this new major saw his name on the envelope, he became of so little value to the staff that he could not carry mail. It was too crazy to believe. Just as General Patton advised, any man who thinks he is so all important already is worthless. This officer was of no value for the 1st Armored Corps the instant he received his promotion. As our 1st Armored Corps and Desert Training Center grew in troop numbers, our staff became more specialized in duties. Every officer had a specific duty and the proper amount of authority to get the job done. In addition, we were supposed to know about the activities of all of the other staff sections. This sharing of information was the reason for our frequent staff meetings. General Patton advised, "We can expect that some of us will be killed. We do not want the loss of one man to stop our killing the enemy. Always have a man trained and ready to take over your job in case you are killed. The test of your ability is whether you can be killed and nothing would be lost." We laughed, but General Patton didn't smile. This principle is not often followed in civilian life. Many corporate executives, all the way down to the janitors, strive to prove their worth by trying to be indispensable. In civilian life, it is called empire building. It is a type of job security to keep others from knowing anything about the work done by you or in your section. Every man was expendable. General Patton did not spare himself. He repeated so often, I do not know of a better way to die than to be facing the enemy when you are shot. When I'm facing forward, I can keep firing my pistols. Always fall forward, never fall backwards. When I heard General Patton make these remarks about how he wanted to die going forward in combat, I was sure that he was building courage for the men. When I knew him better, I was sure that he fully intended to ignore all risks with the hope of being killed, leading his troops into combat. When he said every man is indispensable, including me, he meant every word. The mission is all important. Think about standard rules later. One afternoon, General Marshall was inspecting our Desert Training Command. General Marshall was the chief of staff for all of our military units. At this time, in the summer of 1941, we were losing the war in North Africa. President Roosevelt and Churchill wanted our troops sent to North Africa. We had so many visiting officers from the Pentagon, we doubted that there were any left in Washington. We were on a small hill, our observation point, that we called Patton's Nose. That is, we called it Patton's Nose. When we knew he could not hear us, he knew we called it his nose. In humor, he called this little hill the head, a good place for Pentagon officers. The Navy called their latrine the head. Through field glasses, we were watching the movement of the tanks several miles away. From the little hill, we could see for over 70 miles in the flat desert. We had erected two large wall tents with sides rolled up to provide shade for the high-ranking officers from Washington. Miss Marshall was with her husband. Miss Patton was with with Miss Marshall. This is the only time we ever saw Miss Patton in the desert. The Signal Corps had installed a public address system on the hill and had connected the public address system into the radio network of the tank commanders. The many commands and conversations of the commanders could be heard on the public address system. As we listened to the many officers talking, we could see the dust swirl into the desert where the tanks were racing. General Patton would cut off the commander's radio and explain to the visiting officers, the strategy of the attack. General Patton spoke from a mic that was outside the tent and there's General Patton. He's speaking. General Patton, the cheerleader. General Patton lecturing to the troops. And then sideways, every soldier knew his mission. And then new 1941 light tank. Kind of cool. Let's see what we got here. Light tank crossing a stream. Lieutenant General Hobart Gay, General Patton's 3rd Army Chief of Staff. And then General Patton in a medium tank. 11 o'clock, 11:48. Let's see here. Let's keep going. The mission is all important. Think about standard rules later. Shade from the sun. He would never in the world stand in the shade as his men worked in the hot sun. General Patton announced, now that the Blue Army has located the red enemy, the light tanks will go around the right flank and destroy the red enemy from the rear. Our strategy is grab them by the nose and kick them in the pants. Soldiers understand this strategy. There were questions from the visiting officers and discussions about the speed of tanks in soft sand. Time elapsed and no light tanks moved to attack the right flank of the red enemy. The desert settled into total calm. The wind blew the swirling dust into oblivion. Nothing was moving except General Patton's anger. Being near him, I could hear him call on one radio channel and then on another trying to reach the light tank commander. All this was not over the public address system. Suddenly, General Patton announced to the visiting officers, "We have had a mix-up in command. This is exactly how battles are lost in war. The failure to pursue an enemy can cause many men to die. This maneuver is called off until tomorrow morning. I can assure every one of you that this mix-up in command will not happen tomorrow." General Patton ordered all of his staff to gather around him below the little hill, the observation point. At this meeting, he ordered us to round up the tank commanders for an immediate meeting at our headquarters a few miles away. At this meeting with the commanders, General Patton related the battle plans. He explained the failures that could be caused by not making a rapid pursuit of the enemy. The primary failure was pinpointed on the commander of light tanks, a young lieutenant. After a short discussion, General Patton called the young lieutenant to the front of the staff meeting. "Lieutenant, you know the need for speed and fast action. You were in command of the light tank force. Where were you? Why didn't you attack? What radio channel were you using? Why couldn't I reach you on the radio? Why did you fail to answer when I called?" General Patton was trying to be calm. "We are interested in your explanation, Lieutenant." The young lieutenant was nervous, but he spoke with conviction. "General, I am under the command of Colonel Blank. I knew I was supposed to attack, and we were ready. We were on a radio channel with Colonel Blank, and he ordered us to use so that our commands would be secret, so the enemy could not hear. Colonel Blank told me never to move out until he gave the orders. I never received the order to attack." General Patton asked, "What's your explanation, Colonel Blank?" "My radio went dead." "General, then you should have dashed over there on your own 2 damn feet, if nothing else." "Then sorry for swearing." Radios will always be growing dead. Radios will always be going dead. We must be ready for such radio breakdowns. Colonel, you should have been near enough to the front that Colonel, you should have been near enough to the front that you could have thrown a stone on Lieutenant's tank. General Patton slapped his leg with his cavalry riding stick, which he frequently used as a blackboard pointer. He looked out into the desert. I knew he was trying to cool his anger. "Colonel Blank, I want to see you in my office immediately." General Patton walked back and forth in front of the staff with a couple of slaps of his stick on the side of his leg. It was so silent that the slapping of his boot sounded like the explosion of a firecracker. The young lieutenant was standing at rigid attention in front of the high-ranking officers. General Patton put his arm around the lieutenant, saying, "At ease, Lieutenant. What you did was exactly right according to Army regulations. But let me tell you something else. If you want to be a Napoleon, always think of the mission first. Forgetting about Army regulations. Army regulations are written by those who have never been in battle. They write about what they have been told by others. We have only one mission in combat, and that is to win. If we do not win, you can forget about everything because you will probably be dead. After the battles, the officers in the Pentagon can write about what we did wrong. So often I remember General Patton advising, tell the American soldier what has to be done. And he will do it. Battles are won by determined soldiers who do not spend a split second trying to remember what Army regulations had to say about what to do when the bullets start flying. Let's keep going. Always be alert to the trouble of source. Always be alert to the source of trouble. General Patton was constantly checking with the troops to make sure they understood every mission. He spent every day and many nights training the troops. I was riding with him one evening at dusk when we were outside our diamond-shaped defense. In desert combat, there was no front combat area nor rear area for supplies and medical tents. A desert command, and the same as a battleship sailing on the ocean. The guns of a battleship cannot be turned to fire into the battleship, but the guns of our tanks could be turned to fire into our own troops. With darkness, noise, and the confusion of firing, the troops could get excited and forget the location of our own headquarters, which was the center of the diamond shaped area. We chained the guns on the tanks to fire in only one direction, and we used aiming stakes. Nothing worked. Any morning after a scare from an enemy attack at night, the guns out of our tanks could be aimed directly at the center of our camp. We wanted to prevent. We wanted to prevent the slaughter of our own troops. When we reached actual combat and used live shells, General Patton and I were driving in what we would have been enemy territory if we had been in actual combat. As we were driving towards our camp, we saw one of the outer guards, a soldier with an automatic rifle. General Patton asked me to approach the guard to make sure he knew his exact duty assignment. I walked towards the guard, who stopped me with the order of halt. His rifle was aimed at me. I gave the correct password, and he told me I could advance as he lowered his rifle. I asked the guard what his duties were. He gave a correct report on his duty assignments. I continued, "From which direction do you expect trouble?" The guard pointed to the center of our camp. I started to discipline him. "That is the center of our camp. The enemy would be in the opposite direction. You pointed to where your buddies would be sleeping." He put me in my place. "You didn't ask anything about the enemy. I know where the enemy is. You asked where I expected trouble. I expected trouble from right back there. That's General Patton's headquarters. That's where I expect trouble." I could hear General Patton laughing. He called to me, "Come on back, Williamson. That man understands his mission." The guard asked of me, "Who was that?" I answered, "That was General Patton." "My lord," the guard exclaimed, "you gotta expect General Patton from all directions." General Patton was still chuckling. When I climbed into the open command car, he commanded, are doing our better. We are up to the level of the Roman legions." Since I do not know anything about the training of the Roman legions, I did not say anything. Many years later, I was reading Gibbon's book, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. I thought of General Patton's words when I read it was an inflexible maxim of Roman's discipline that a good soldier should dread his officers far more than the enemy. Okay. Select leaders for accomplishment and not for affection. Any officer to flatten General Patton took a great chance of being transferred. General Patton demanded obedience, but not blindness. He never objected to anyone opposing his plans if there was a good basis for the altered plan. I remember General Patton telling his methods of selecting leaders. He said, "Does not make any difference what the rank is for promotion. Could be for a colonel or a corporal. Picking the right leader is the most important task of every commander. When I have a promotion to make, I line up all of the candidates and give them a problem I want them to solve. I say, 'Men, I want a trench dug behind a warehouse. Make this trench 8 feet long, 3 feet wide, and 6 inches deep.' That's all I tell them. I use some warehouse that has windows or a large knot hole. While the candidates are checking out the tools they want to use, I get inside the building and watch through the window or knot hole. The men will drop all the spades and picks on the ground behind the warehouse I watch. After resting for several minutes, they will start talking about why I want such a shallow trench. They will argue that 6 inches is not deep enough for a gun placement. Others will argue that such a trench should be dug with power equipment. Others will say it is too hot or cold to dig. If the men are officers, there will be complaints that they should not be doing such lowly labor as digging a trench. Finally, one man will give an order to the others. "Let's get this trench dug and get out of here." Doesn't make any difference what that old SOB wants to do with the trench. General Patton would pause before explaining. "That man gets the promotion. Never pick a man because he slobbers all over you with kind words. Too many commanders pick dummies to serve on their staff. Such dummies don't know how to do anything except say yes. Such men are not leaders. Any man who picks a dummy cannot be a leader. Pick the man that can get the job done." I remember General Patton saying so often, "Do I care whether the men are like me? We are fighting a war. We could be killed. and should be. If we do not pick good leaders, war is a killing business. We have to teach the troops how to save their lives and kill the enemy. You must pick men who can get the job done. When you are leading, you are not in a contest to see how happy you can keep the troops. You are not returning or running for public office. Sorry, let's do it again. When you are leading, you are not in a contest to see how happy you can keep the troops. You are not running for public office. General Patton did not get angry at officers or enlisted men swearing at him if they had a good reason. I do not remember any officer calling General a Patton a son of a bee in his presence. I do not remember a captain calling General Patton a damn fool and remaining alive. And sorry for swearing once again, guys. I should explain that for General Patton, there were two types of sons of bees. When he called me a son of a bee for moving his gasoline by rail, I was not exactly happy, but I could tell he was not angry. If General Patton used the term and smiled, it was a compliment. If he scowled with his war face when he used the term, it was bad news. General Patton seemed to enjoy being called such a fool when he would try something the troops thought could not be done. I remember a young captain, a company commander, who called General Patton a fool. Not once, but several times. General Patton came upon the captain with all of his men working to dig, in which several of their trucks and banks and tanks back to the solid bank of a steam. Sorry, I said that again. That was terrible. I have to be honest. 1 second. General Patton came upon the captain with all of his men working to dig and winch several of their trucks and tanks back to the solid bank of a stream. There was much shouting and swearing as the men had to wade in sand and mud to inch the vehicles back to solid ground. The captain was in command and was not to be bothered, not even with General Patton. General Patton went into a rage. Captain, I've told you a dozen times to hit that stuff with speed. You could never cross anything trying to creep through sand. The faster you go, the quicker you will get through. The captain replied with anger equal to General Patton's. That's equal. That's exactly the reason I have 5 vehicles in sand up to the axle, General. Anyone trying to cross that stream bed at any speed is a fool. General Patton scanned the stream bed, which was about as wide as the distance from home plate to second base. There was no water in the stream, which was a level as a floor expect. There was no water in the stream, which was as level as a floor except for the 5 vehicles the captain was trying to pull out. General Patton walked onto the wet sand. General Patton walked onto the wet sand and stamped his foot. At the edge of the stream, the sand was solid. I'll show you how to get a jeep through this stuff. It takes speed. General Patton took the place of his driver in the jeep. The captain stood in front of the jeep. General, believe me, in the center of the stream, everything will sink. Even a duck couldn't cross. You'll be thrown out of the jeep like a sack of jelly beans. Give me room. I'm going through. General Patton ordered as he backed the jeep up 50 feet before charging the flat sand bed. For half of the distance, General Patton skimmed on the wet sand until the jeep suddenly sank deeper than any of the captain's vehicles. General Patton would have been thrown headfirst into the sand and mud if the windshield had not been in the upright position. The captain called, "Stay where you are, General. I'll send a couple of men to carry you out." General Captain shouted back, "Keep your men where they are. If I'm such a fool enough to get in here, I sure as hell am not going to be a stupid fool enough to let some soldier carry me out. I'm not a casualty yet." General Patton sludged through the mud, which was halfway to his knees. The work on the other vehicles stopped as everyone watched. Everyone was smiling and holding back laughter. General Patton walked up the bank and slotted. General Patton walked up the bank and saluted the captain. "You were right. I'm a damn fool. Sorry for swearing. My gosh. My bad. I'm going to write an order so no one else will be as big of a fool. There will be no crossing of anything until some soldier is positive the ground can take the weight of a vehicle. If I had walked into the mud, if I had walked to the middle of the stream, I would have found that wet spot. We have to know what we are doing if we want to save the lives of our men and vehicles. General Patton put his arm around the captain, saying, "You are one of 5 SOBs." General Patton was laughing. All the soldiers broke into laughter, followed by a cheer. General Patton waved his hand to the troops. "Now don't expect me to entertain you for the rest of the afternoon. Let's get these vehicles out of the mud, including my Jeep. Let's get these vehicles out of the mud, including my Jeep." Okay, so we're on every leader must have authority to watch his responsibility. I'm going to go back to the restream and then stop sharing screen. And then let's go here. We're going to get out of the return section. Click borrow. Okay, I'm in. So I'll be back. We're going to take a break. Thank you guys for everything. You're doing a great job. Don't forget that. How's it going, everyone? We are back. Okay. Every leader must have authority to match his responsibility. If you run into any problems, tell them I sent you. You were acting for me. Right or wrong, I'll back you up. But you better be right. General Patton used these words in sending staff members to Washington and to other commands. He demanded loyalty from his staff, and he gave total support to every one of us. We knew he would back us up, although we made a mistake. This backup support caused every one of us to exert every effort to be right in what we did. This principle is a basic principle of management, which is said in many different ways. One way of saying it: never send a boy to do a man's job. The job may require the authority of a man, but some commanders would give staff members the authority of a boy. Another way of stating this principle is in the Articles of War that no soldier dares question the authority of an officer. This idea is not accepted by some who believe in equal rights, discrimination, and that everyone must be treated the same. Such ideas are for peacetime thinking. In war, there is no time to question the authority of an officer. This principle has been a rule of command for centuries. If soldiers could pull the tanks, if soldiers could pull the ranks to see whether to obey their officers, many lives would be lost. Taking polls is a type of mob rule. The mob troops dare not rule in war. There are three grades of rank in most armies: officers, non commissioned officers, and enlisted men. By different names, these ranks have been used for hundreds of years. There must not be too much friendship between these ranks, or the authority of the officer is lost. The military term for this is fraternization. General Patton told the story of one of his experiences in World War I. It was a cold night in France. I asked the soldier standing guard outside my tent to come outside for a drink and to get warm around my pot-bellied stove. I knew it was against regulations to fraternize with the troops, but I knew the man was freezing. We had a short drink, and the guard stepped outside. I curled up in my bedding roll after putting on more clothes. A few weeks later, I had a meeting in my headquarters tent with some British and French officers interested in tanks. Right in the middle of our conference, the same guard I had befriended stepped inside the tent, saying, "Major, let's you and me have a little drink." We laughed as General Patton continued, "Soldiers must be trained to obey their officers. There dare not be any delay in following a command, or many lives will be lost. Soldiers get scared. Commissioned officers dare not get scared at any time. Soldiers must be trained to attack enemy positions with never a falter in their attack. Fear of death will scare some, but a true soldier can give his life without any hesitation. Officers have the commission to destroy the enemy. The rank on an officer's soldiers. The rank on an officer's shoulder gives the authority to make the decisions so necessary in war. That is, if we are to win, and we are going to win, our society is going through the stages of equal rights for all and no discrimination among any. This thinking results in mob rule. Let everybody decide in everything. It is assumed that this thinking is supported by our leaders of management and labor who meet to solve their problems. Much of this thinking is pushed by those favoring the Japanese system of management, which tends to let every worker help make policy decisions. Many of the media assume that the Japanese system and General Patton's principles are completely different. This is completely wrong. As I understand the Japanese management system, is a as I understand the Japanese management system, It is general policy that every leader must talk with the troops. This principle was basic with General Patton. He was always talking with the troops to let them know what was happening in the war and what needed to be done. Such talking was not one way. General Patton learned of all of the grips. Huh. I'll look this one up. Because it could be gripes. It's not popping up. Let's just see here. Uh, where was I? Okay, it says such talking was not one way. General Patton learned of all of the gripes or grips and complaints of the troops. Let's see here. Grips and complaints. I'm guessing grips would mean like what they hold on to, and complaints, right? So let's just go with that. General Patton learned of all of the grips and complaints of the troops, but General Patton made all of the command decisions without any concern over whether the troops would agree. An example of the Japanese system of management happened during a long distance telephone interview I was having with a reporter from a large American daily newspaper. This newspaper reporter was stressing the need for management to permit all workers to have a part in making policy decisions for the newspaper. I was stressing that some one person had to have the command of the newspaper. I was not winning any points with this reporter who stressed that every worker would work harder if he had part in the decision making process. I won the argument when the reporter broke in. This interview is ended. His profanity was almost equal to that of General Patton's. I assumed he was angry with me, so I added, "Sorry. I had hoped we could differ without anger over something." He broke in again. "It is not your fault. Some stupid idiot in the computer room decided to make a chip change. He has knocked out all of our computer terminals without letting me know what he was doing. He killed my word professor. He killed my word processor." I could not resist saying, "Now you have the answer as to what can happen when the troops can make command decisions. You win." I see what you were trying to tell about General Patton's principle on authority and responsibility. That idiot in the computer room should not have any authority. And he's totally without any responsibility or brains in doing what he did without letting anyone know. I think I'll go down and shoot him. You were making sounds like General Patton. I teased the reporter. He laughed. General Patton was right. A few times in the military experience, I had to give orders to save lives, not in combat with a shooting enemy, but with crippled aircraft. A few times in the military experience, I had to give orders to save lives, not in combat with a shooting enemy, but with crippled aircraft. In 1944, I was asked to give a B-26 twin-engine bomber a test flight to check out newly installed radar equipment. On board were a dozen electronic engineers anxious to test their new equipment. Soon after takeoff, the right engine started to lose power. The temperature of the engine was increasing as the oil pressure decreased. It was easy to figure out that the engine was getting hot because it was not getting oil. We were less than 100 feet above the ground when I made the decision to feather the prop on the bad engine to prevent burning up the engine. Feathering the prop means the thin edge of the prop is pointed forward. This prevents the flat side of the props from acting as a brake and slowing down the speed of the plane. When the propeller was feathered, I cut off all of the electrical power to the engineers' radar equipment. When their radar scopes turned back and they saw the feathered prop, the engineers started strapping on their parachutes, getting ready to jump. I shouted above the noise of the overworked remaining engine. Anyone who jumps at this altitude will be killed. There was a door in the belly of the plane the engineers could use to jump. I could not physically keep any engineer from jumping. I shouted again. If it is necessary to jump, I'll tell you when. We have one good engine. We're not in danger of crashing. This quieted the engineers, except for one who went berserk in his fright. I ordered, tie that man up before he jumps out. He'll kill himself. Several of the engineers overpowered their friend. Since they did not have any rope, two of them sat on him to keep him from jumping. Landed with only one engine was not difficult. As I circled the field preparing to land, I thought about General Patton and his principles of rank. Someone had to give the command not to jump, or all the engineers would have jumped out. At less than 500 feet, the lowest altitude to jump, to expect the parachute to open with time to slow the fall. I gave the command, and engineers, acting as non-commissioned officers, carried out the command to keep the one engineer from jumping. This man was the scared soldier who had to obey or he would have been killed. The engineers had followed the time-worn principles of command. In less than 15 minutes, I made a routine landing on the paved runway. I insisted that this scared soldier be taken to the hospital. He was still shaking after he was on the ground. It was not difficult to have my hospital order carried out. I called the airport control tower to let the control tower operators know we were having engine trouble. The tower operator ordered a fire truck and ambulance to wait for our possible crash landing. The medics, non-commissioned officers, carried out the order to take the scared engineer to the hospital. I was told it took several hours to calm the shaking engineer. Army regulations state that there must be complete separation between officers and the troops. This includes separate quarters, dining rooms, mess halls, and restrooms. Officers had the same fears as the soldiers, but the soldiers should not get so well acquainted, fraternized with the officers, to learn that officers were not free from fear. One time I was scared, in an odd way, in World War II. I was flying from Los Angeles to Florida. I landed to refuel at a small military airport in Texas. I was using the standing urinal in the restroom when the fellow officer came into the restroom. This fellow officer was a young, attractive member of the WASP, Women's Auxiliary Service Pilots. Women, as service pilots, were officers. We had only the two ranks for restrooms, officer and enlisted men. After losing a flight in the air, this young lady did not have time to wait nor check on who was in the officer's restroom. She had a command to go and took the one restroom available, according to her rank. The authority of military officers is so great in combat that an officer in every command is given the authority to use the 45 cal handgun to shoot any enlisted man who turns away from the enemy. This is not common knowledge with the general public who would think such action too drastic. The public decided that General Patton should not have slapped that enlisted man in the hospital, although it was obvious the man had deserted from his outfit. An interesting feature of this face slap incident was the doctor's report that this man had a high fever. The high fever was not detected until 2 days after the man had been protected from his fear in the hospital. When I read of the 2-day delay in the high fever report, I recalled the GI soap trick so many men used to get a trip to the hospital or as a method to get home sooner. A silver of GI soap, either the green or the yellow type, was used as substitutory. This soap was so strong that would generate a high fever, usually after 2 days. It was impossible to keep men from using the soap to avoid unpleasant duty, but the doctors could solve the illness by doing nothing other than keeping the man away from the GI soap. When I read of the 2-day delay in the high fever, I puzzled over whether some other patient or a doctor had suggested the soap substitutory trick to build a medical record to get him home sooner. General Patton was given an award in World War I for threatening to shoot any man who turned away from the front. President Truman in World War I gave the same command when his men were retreating. President Truman in World War I gave the same command when his men were retreating. Captain Truman shouted, "Any SOB who isn't back in position in 10 seconds will be shot." After Captain Truman's command, the battle became a joke in his organization as the Battle of Who Run? Among soldiers, the authority of officers is well known. Every article of war is read to every soldier early in basic training. Recently, a Navy lieutenant was quoted as saying, "I was about ready to draw my pistol and shoot any man who failed to help get the damage under control." The lieutenant's ship had been hit. The lieutenant's ship had been hit in one of our many wars, if there is such a thing as many war. All of us suffer when our local police do not have any of the authority. All of us suffer when our local police do not have any All of us suffer when our local police do not have the authority to match the responsibility of stopping crime. Our present society wants our policemen shot before they can shoot at the criminal. Our firemen do not have enough authority to put fires. Our firemen do not have enough authority to put out fires when some of the public block roads and damage firefighting equipment. We can be sure there would be some changes in police work and firefighting if we gave these officers the authority of a military officer. When the criminal has more rights, authority than our police, we can expect to have more criminals. Okay, so we're gonna take a break. We're doing good. Let's keep it up, you guys. What's it say here? 11:50, 12:18. Okay, let's take a break. We'll be back. Thank you, guys. What's up, you guys? Good seeing you. Okay. Protect the troops first. The wishes of superior officers are secondary. This patent principle is the opposite of the usual rule. Obey all orders no matter what. It does not match the military rule of ours. It's not a reason to why. Ours is to die or do. This patent principle also violates some of General Patton's principles of loyalty. But no officer ever suffered General Patton's anger if a valid reason existed for differing with the general. I know. I differed with him many times, but never with reasons. I differed with him many times, but never without reasons. He demanded absolute loyalty when time would not permit discussion. We had not been in our desert training center a month when General Marshall wanted to move all of our troops to North Africa to engage in combat with the Germans. We were not ready. General Patton worked at the training. I remember his shouting at the truck and tank drivers. I will shoot any man driving his tank within 100 yards of another tank. Get in the habit of staying apart. Make the enemy waste his ammo on only one tank. Never let the enemy get two sitting ducks with one round of fire. Make the enemy make a separate attack on every tank and truck. We will all live longer. Every day Patton would rage at the troops to take more caution in preparing for combat. Every night we posted guards as if we were in combat, but we were not ready for combat with any enemy when we could not combat the heat of the desert. We were in the middle of a morning staff meeting when General Marshall called from Washington. General Patton took the call in front of the staff. We could hear General Patton's side of the conversation. It takes at least 6 weeks to get a man ready to fight in the desert. Anything short of 6 weeks, and we'll lose more men from heat than from the enemy. George, we must give these men more training. General Patton's argument was stressed with choice words of profanity. General Patton won the argument over his old friend, General George Marshall, the chief of staff for all of our armies. General Patton and General Marshall were good friends. But friends or not, to swear at the chief of staff could be death of a military career. General Patton never placed his military career above his concern for the troops. General Marshall was being pushed by Churchill to send troops to North Africa to help the British. General Patton did not know and would not accept any halfway measures. No soldier could be halfway ready to kill the enemy. He wanted the troops fully trained and physically and mentally to kill. I remember his words. We are going to move and move fast. We are not going to dig any foxholes and wait for the enemy to come shooting at us. We will be shooting at them first. When every soldier can move a mile in 15 minutes, we will confuse the hell out of the enemy. We will be where the enemy never expect us to be. General Patton caused General Marshall to slow down the movement of the troops. General Patton raged. It's such a shame. Waste and of the most wonderful manhood of America to send green troops into combat before they are ready. We must train to win. As usual, General Patton was right, but he was alone in thinking. The history of World War II has many examples of failure to always be ready for combat. The result is the loss of many, of the most wonderful manhood of America. The history of the world would be different if the Pearl Harbor commanding generals had followed General Patton's principle of always protect the troops first. Prior to December 7th, 1941, many people knew the Japanese naval force was in the Pacific heading towards Pearl Harbor. Our intelligence units had broken the Japanese codes. Our intelligence had intercepted radio conversations from the ships and planes planning the attack on Pearl Harbor. According to reliable reports, they knew the date and the hour of the attack. All of this information was relayed to Washington. However, President Roosevelt and General Marshall could not believe that the Japanese would break the international laws of no killing without a declaration of war. Roosevelt and Marshall had sound reasons for their thinking. The Japanese the Japanese representatives were in Washington to negotiate peace. The Japanese negotiator said, "Is it possible to negotiate peace when all of your ships and planes are armed and ready to fire? I saw the weapons of war when I landed in Hawaii. If you want to talk peace, we must disarm." But the Japanese did not disarm. President Roosevelt asked General Marshall to order the Pearl Harbor military to step down their defenses. The orders were remove the ammunition from the guns, take a long weekend. We are going to have peace through negotiation. The war of words would be fought before the war of guns. Thousands of lives would have been saved in World War II if the troops had been protected first. General Patton would never obey any order from the president or any chief of staff that would unduly endanger the lives of the troops. General Patton would have followed the wisdom of General Washington. The way to peace is to be prepared for war. If General Patton had been in command at Pearl Harbor, he would have obeyed the troops and obeyed the orders from Washington by scattering the. Hold on. If General Patton had been in command at Pearl Harbor, he would have obeyed the orders. If General Patton had been in command at Pearl Harbor, he would have obeyed the orders from Washington by scattering the troops away from any central bombing area. General Patton would have lectured to his commanders. There is a large enemy task force approaching our area. We have orders from Washington to disarm, but the orders do not say when to disarm. He would take one of his long silent periods before saying, "We will disarm 10 days after that Japanese task force is out of our area. Stay alert. Always be ready for an attack." Okay, so we're going to take a break. Thank you guys. We appreciate it. What's up, you guys? Welcome back. All right. An active mind cannot exist in an inactive body. Wars are won by men with strong wills to win and with strong bodies. General Patton preached, a strong will to win is more important than a strong body. Napoleon said, it takes the sword and the spirit to win in war. The spirit is most important. Men have won battles when totally exhausted and near death from injuries. However, that will to win did not get into the brain without having a strong body. You have to keep the body active to keep all of the juices running to the right places. General Patton never stopped preaching physical fitness. His death proved that he was right about getting the body juices to the right place. The true cause of his death was his being unable to keep his body active. General Patton never wanted to die in bed. After the auto accident, he could not move because of a broken neck. After the auto accident, he could not move because of a broken back. The juices piled up in his lungs. In the winter of 1941, we were stationed at Fort Benning, Georgia. We were the first armored corps, the first corps of tanks in World War II. The term corps meant that we should have 2 or more tank divisions in our command. A tank division had approximately 15,000 men and approximately 70 tanks of light and medium size. We had never seen a medium tank. We had pictures. Everything we did was based on guesswork and on General Patton's memory of his experiences with tanks in World War I. We did not have any guides on how many men or tanks would be needed to make up a corps. We did have trucks and cars. Most of our equipment matched the trucks and cars of the civilian models on the highway. We were the first armored corps in name, but we were short 50,000 men and all the fighting equipment for war. First Armored Corps was made up of our staff of 15 officers plus our headquarters company of approximately 200 men. All of our big guns were 6-inch stovepipes mounted on trucks. After Pearl Harbor, our primary task was to write reports on exactly how many men and how many tasks should be done in an armored corps. Every day we sent reports to Washington. Hold on. After Pearl Harbor, our primary task was to write reports on exactly how many men and how many tanks should be in an armored corps. Every day we sent reports to Washington suggesting what we decided would be needed in men and tanks for a corps. We were in war, but we were working on the paper work to prepare the proper tables of organization and the tables of basic allowances for a corps of tanks. The term used were TO for table of organization and TBA for the table of basic allowances for the equipment. Every day we received new TOs and TBAs from Washington. We had to study these charts and propose changes when we did not approve. Our approval was based on our experiences with the men and equipment in the field under the combat conditions or as rare combat conditions as General Patton could create. For our combat conditions, we used 4-door sedans for tanks and stovepipes for our guns mounted on trucks. The war was raging in Europe and in the Pacific, but we were firing stovepipe guns and shooting paper reports to Washington. This type of work did not require any physical exertion. We had office desks and office chairs to sit in as we puzzled over our paperwork. General Patton provided the exercise. He demanded that every man run a mile every day. This was 30 years before jogging became the thing to do. Frequently, General Patton would stop at my desk and ask, "How long have you been sitting at the desk? Get up and get out of here. Your brain stops working after you keep sitting in a swivel chair for 20 minutes. Keep your body moving around so the juices will run to the right places. It'll be good for the brain. If you sit in that chair too long, all of your brain power will be in your shoes. You cannot keep your mind active when your body is inactive. Every hour of the day was filled with work and physical exercise. General Patton kept our bodies and our minds active." All right. we'll be on the next chapter next because I think we should listen to what you just said, right? Keep the juices flowing. We're gonna take a break. Feel free to walk around, like you just said. Go for a quick walk. I'll be back soon. No problem, right? Let's do it. Okay, welcome back. Make the mind control the body, never let the body command the mind. I remember General Patton saying, now if you are going to win any battle, you have to do one thing. You have to make the mind run the body. Never let the body tell the mind what to do. The body is always ready to give up and quit. It is always tired, morning, noon, and night. The body is not tired if the mind is not tired. When you were young, the mind could make you dance all night, and the body was never tired. You could go home from work and be dead tired until some girl would call asking you to dance. Suddenly the mind assumed command and to hold. Suddenly the mind assumed command and told the dead tired body that it was not tired. You had 10 times more energy to dance than you had when you went to work in the morning. It is the same way in war. When you are tired, the enemy is tireder. You always have to make the mind take over and keep the body going. Never let the body command the mind. No matter how tired we are, we will never let the enemy rest. We will rest after we have destroyed those fools. The mind can control the body. It is common for us to decide what our bodies cannot do before the body ever gets a chance to try. I am a leg amputee. My mind decided all of the many tasks of work which I could not do on one leg. One day I saw a man with no legs using crutches on a sandy beach, with no legs touching the ground. That double amputee taught me to try everything. My mind had decided that I could not climb a ladder on one leg and two crutches until I saw a dog go bounding up a ladder. A dog does not have any hands to hold a ladder. A dog's legs on a ladder are about the same as four crutches on a ladder. That dog taught me to make my mind to order my stupid body to go up a ladder. Most tasks are simple when the mind decides that the task is going to be done. During many of General Patton's lectures, he would ask, ever watch a cat stretch out after a long snooze? A cat will stretch every muscle as far as every muscle will go. When did you reach as high over your head as you could reach? When did you put your back and head on the floor and stretch your arms and legs as far as you could stretch? Ever try rolling over when your arms and legs are stretched to the limit? Be careful when you do. Could put you in the hospital for a week. General Patton's stretching ideas seemed foolish for all of the younger officers. In 1984, over 42 years after heading General Patton's advice, in 1984, in 1984, over 42 years after hearing General Patton's advice, I read the advice of Dr. Lawrence C. Lamb in a military journal. Dr. Lamb advised, if you're going to do heavy labor, it is wise to warm up, stretch, work, and then stretch again. Everyone needs a daily stretching program that provides a means to stretch most of the major muscle groups in the body. My mind returned to General Patton and is talking of how cats stretch before starting to move. Everything General Patton said was geared to combat. I remember one day he shouted to the troops, throw away your pillows. A pillow takes up too much room in your bedding roll. It is worthless. Will not stop a bullet. Keep your head straight so you can get more oxygen into the lungs. Blood will not flow uphill as easily as it will on the level. You elevate your head on the pillow, you're decreasing your brain power. Not enough air can get your lungs or brain going if you use a pillow. Let's read it again. Sorry. Not enough air can get in your lungs or brains. Not enough air can get in your lungs or brain if you use a pillow. General Patton smiled and the men laughed. His final advice, if you want to have the brains to think tall, you got to sleep tall, sit tall, and stand tall. To win, we got to figure out exactly how we were going to win before we go into combat to kill the bastards. Sorry. So sorry. I am so sorry. That's not what I meant to say. To win, we got to figure out exactly how we are going to win before we go into combat to kill those fools. During the 1984 Olympic Games in Los Angeles, several of the gold medal winners said they won because they set their minds to win. Mind setting is a new term for the current young generation. Such mind setting to win is the same as General Patton's principle of making the mind command the body. General Patton gave his mind setting idea over 40 years before the 1984 Olympic Games. All right, brain power comes from the lungs. We'll get to this later. I apologize for any swearing. I don't mean to. It just kind of comes out sometimes, and when it comes out, it comes out. So thank you. I'm just trying to do this. I appreciate your patience and everything like that. Keep going, guys. We got this. I'll be back. Okay, actually, at second thought, we're gonna stop here. We've read for 2 hours today. That's like a good session. So brain power comes from the lungs. We'll do that next time. I appreciate all the support, guys.